The 11 million. I knew I forgot something. It's actually linked in the article on Medium. It's from a TED Talk. I mentioned the TED Talk, and so 3.5% of Americans roughly is 11 million people. And so that's her point, as she went in and she looked at tipping points. Is violent resistance or nonviolent resistance? How does change happen in the face of resistance? And what's the tipping point, the number of people that we finally begin to get that 100th monkey effect, that butterfly effect, where the energy is sufficient to shift beyond our own knowing, by witnessing it in each other. We begin. I just had a huge download about this piece the other night. What is the magic number? How do we get the quantum momentum necessary to begin to have a shared breath of recognition? One of my downloads, and I think I've shared it with you, or if I haven't, I've shared it. It's come through so many times that I know it's one that's going to be a profound connector through all this. So fast forward if I've told you this, but part of the healing conversation, the series of questions, the unpacking that it takes us through, the quality of questions are so psychically disruptive that it begins to create an opening, a small, profound opening to a possibility that we really are capable of consciously working our way out of the mess we've created, finding our way back to the human operating system. So this piece of it in particular is, how do you begin, like you and I have a conversation and I can get in front of 20 people, or maybe we get in the right platform, but hearing it once is not enough. How do we reinforce it? How do we witness it in each other? So to take a conscious breath, a mindful breath at the top of every hour, is the tactical piece of this process. See, they show me not just the big picture, what we're doing, but how to do it, right? So the how to do it, how to bring this awakening to each other, is to witness it in each other. So by making a commitment, and this is one of those Dagama quiet whisper downloads that comes through, to get everybody to be conscious at the top of every hour, just to take a breath of unity. Breathe in the idea that there are other people taking a breath right now, and we understand that we're part of something bigger and better than how we're showing up right now. And pretty soon you get a room full of people. So if everybody's taking a breath at the top of the hour, we're just kind of watching the clock a little bit, like, or just our phones just have a little app with a little ding that just reminds people that we're all taking a breath together. It's like a one breath worldwide meditation. And then your body starts to tune to that, because it feels really good to know that we're not alone in this, that everybody's waking up. Your body starts to anticipate that and starts to hold a whole new vibrational frequency. And it's just this simply brilliant movement, the butterfly effect. I'm doing it, at 1 o'clock in California. Somebody else is doing it at 2 o'clock in Colorado, and 3 o'clock in Minneapolis, and 4 o'clock in Fiji. It's like this whisper at the top of every hour that we're going to meet each other. And remember, not once a day. It needs to be a more steady practice. And imagine how much more mindful we would all be if at the top of the hour, we all just kind of look around the room and notice who's taking a moment, just a half a second, just to see who else is awake, who's taking a breath. Life begins with breath. And the life that we're supposed to be living right now begins with breath. Oh, I'm in the middle of a download. So there are lots of layers to this thing. Is so multidimensional. The detail, the level of minutia that they show me about how to execute on this vision, on this, to go from a conversation to an activation, is the breath. That shared top of the hour breath. I'll meet you at the top of the hour. And for a third of a moment, we'll just take a breath together. And we'll anticipate that. And we'll have this oxytocin hangover that runs into the next hour. And we start to look for opportunities through these podcasts where we're all breathing in together as one, the oneness that we are. 11 million people, 3.5% of the U.S. population is all it's going to take to create a tipping point here in the United States. Now, you don't think if we could create a tipping point here, this isn't going to ignite something worldwide? We'll just let them laugh. Let them laugh at those crazy people at the top of the hour. Everybody stops and takes a breath together to remember that we're here to love each other. Who's going to start ridiculing that? And the contrast, because there will be those who will ridicule it. The contrast will not be about who did you vote for, but how could you be against something that the top of every hour we just stop to remember that we're here to love each other. We're here to be love. That doesn't get in the way of anybody's church, anybody's belief systems. And those who will resist it are the shadow. It's the most non-violent way to unite that takes nothing but a moment of mindfulness at the top of every hour. And when we're asleep, we'll take a breath for those that are too busy to. I just imagine how that just percolates. We're all taking a breath for each other. I like this. So when I finished that, I watched it, and the download continues with the symbolism of breath. This there's a lot to unpack about one of the biggest divisions between the right and the left, and it's free will versus the dogma of controlling a woman's body. In essence, it's the core of the patriarchy. And one of the centerpieces of that argument is, of course, abortion. Now, abortion, within the lens of the patriarchy, you could see that they have embraced the idea that they are there to protect the innocence of an unborn child. But even though the Bible is replete with the wisdom of the plan that each human can exercise free will, far-right Christians can't embrace that, because that goes in direct opposition to the patriarchal interpretation of religion to protect women from themselves. That we are somehow not capable of having our own hero's journey, to figure out our own story, to make our own choices. I believe, and I have always believed, that life begins with breath. That's when the soul transitions to the physical form. It can hang out in the belly for a while, but it doesn't really become embodied until it can breathe on its own, takes its own breath. I have great karmic work around breath. I had a fucking pulmonary embolism and died for lack of breath. Holotropic breath work is our natural, if we didn't have access to the plants, it's our natural way to connect with DMT, which is the God molecule, which is our own divinity in our own bodies. So this butterfly effect of breathing mindfully at the top of every hour with each other is the most powerful way to shift the vibration across the planet. Because even though the people who will want to resist this, they still have to take a breath. And they'll have to consciously choose not to participate in that love breath that everybody's taking at the top of the hour. And in that, they have to go against their own physical nature to breathe. The parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems have this disruptive moment. I'm going to hold my breath for a minute and be defiant rather than breathe in the love. See, I don't think it's words. I think words get us there. It's taking action. It's turning emotion into motion. Creating a wave of recognition with each other, a wave of witnessing. To see who's holding their breath and who's taking a breath. I'm not holding my breath for everybody else to figure this out anymore. I want to take a breath with everyone who's clear that we're here to love, not to hurt each other, to fully experience a relationship with life. These exquisite expressions that Mother Nature has given us to interact with. And all the shapes, colors, sizes, textures of humans to interact with. billions and billions and billions of variables of experience, untold, infinite iterations of sensory input, because we all agree to come here in physical form. We should do like a GoFundMe $1 app to get 11 million people to download it and just have a little bird chirp, some right frequency, singing bowl tone, like the old clocks in your grandmother's house that always had the top of the hour reminder that time is passing and we should use it wisely. We should really slow down to notice what an hour means to us so that we make our time here sacred and not wasted. Yeah. This is the movement. It's such a sacred, subtle, quiet, inward. Everyone can breathe mindfully. Take in the shared breath of grace. To know that we're here. To witness each other in that breath. And from that breath comes two, let's say we get it right. We remember 5 hours out. Maybe we just get real 1 hour a day. The top of the hour when we wake up, we set the alarm to go off 3 minutes early so that we are in position and ready to breathe consciously. Maybe that's the only one you got time for, one a day. Or you look forward to it at night. And the rest of your day just goes as it normally would be, but one breath at the top of an hour, somewhere in the 24-hour cycle, each day. That's 7 more breaths a week than we're enjoying now. Times 11 million people. This has to be positioned as such a neutral, non-liberal, non-religious recognition that our human operating system defaults to love, and to remind our bodies of this. We default to the number one vital imperative of the human operating system, which is breath. We can go without food and water, but we cannot go without breath. And that's the reality of where we are at now. That urgency is an existential breath. And we say thank you. Thank you for this life, for the chance to figure this out before it's too late. We aren't going out without a love fest. We're going to do everything we can to love ourselves out of the fear and the sadness and the hate and all the other symptoms of separation by connecting in breath height of our expression. And imagine what that does vibrationally. To open the portals of movement in people's lives. The synchronicities we're going to begin to notice, the conversations that are going to shift, the recognition of the oneness, even if it's just one breath an hour. We're breathing it anyway. Let's just show up and mirror it. Let's breathe out loud. Once an hour, the top of our hour, the top of our expression. And then there's a giggle. There's an innocence, a moment of, oh, we're better than this. We remember who we are. And the joy of connecting at that level with that many people changes everything. It changes everything. And we didn't fight over it anymore. Everything that needs to be done, we're ready for those conversations to happen. The forgiveness, the allowance, the acceptance, the reprioritization of all of our assets and resources to resolving the messes that we've made. But we can't get to that because we don't even believe it's possible without sharing one breath of knowing between us that it's possible. Mama Aya told me to build a sacred witness circle around myself. That we needed to show up as sacred witnesses to each other, that it was the greatest gift we can give to one another, is to be a sacred witness. And to be a sacred witness, we can have no judgments. We just observe, fully see each other for our humanity, for our brokenness, for our pain and suffering and what we have endured and also done to one another, because it was done to us. We are the symptom of thousands of years of pain and unconsciousness being passed on. And we're breathing our last breaths on this planet. We're gasping for our survival as a species. So we must slow this way down and get out of the hyperventilation of fear to one breath at the top of every hour. And then we go about our day. Imagine what that would do for our collective stress. People on the highways sitting side by side, car by car, at the top of the hour, looking around each other going, I see you in this rat race. And we're going to get through this. We're going to take it not one step at a time, not one election at a time, not one fight in Congress at a time, not one scandal at a time. We got to take this all the way back to being reborn into our oneness. Birth is breath. Birth is breath for this. To take that once an hour rebirthing moment with each other. Feel that mojo start to build its own juiciness, its own, we've got this. And we start to listen to our bellies differently. We listen for our truth and not the acid of fear. Once an hour, that breath reminds us that we're living in truth with each other. And it re-educates our body to live in our truth. We reflect it back at each other. That is what the sacred witnessing is all about. Right now, we're breathing next to each other all day long. It's the one thing we all have in common, more so than any other appetite in the human form. Breath comes first. We're just going to breathe in love. Just hold it, feel it, let it soak in, and then let it go. And we let go of all the things that make us think that that's not possible. The belief systems, the lack of self-worth, like somehow we don't deserve to be happy. Somehow we don't deserve to live in a world that's based on love, not fear. We have our own story about it's not possible, so how could a breath even have an impact? Of course. It is all we are. Life begins with breath, it ends with breath. What happens in the middle is just breath. And what we pay attention to while we're doing it. So, my loves, it's a holy breath in union and communion with one another. And the coolest part is you get to practice it all the rest of the hour. You can keep that union breath going. And fill your body with anandamide, bliss molecules, our own natural anti-anxiety, anti-depression tools. Most of us are depressed because we're giving up hope that this mess can ever be reconciled, or that the wounding inside of us that feels insurmountable can never be met in a world that demands that we not ever give in to that wounding, to heal. I'm so grateful for this time of imposed rest that my body is insisting on right now. The mythology that it's my Achilles tendon that's ruptured and that I have to be non-weight bearing for several months while this thing heals. The symbology of what's happening around us right now is so profound. Slowing down, taking a breath, you just begin to notice the magnitude of support that the universe is giving us. Pachamama is like turning up the fire on the planet. It's catching our breath, right? It's throwing us off, hyperventilating. She's part of the healing process with us. She's our lungs. So we become more in line with the breath of the oneness of all of us. We also become in line with the breath of Pachamama. She is a living, breathing planet. We are living beings who depend on breath for life. Seems like breathing together is a good way to bring life back into the relationship we have with Pachamama. We say thank you for this breath. Thank you for this beautiful world that I get to breathe in. Once an hour, thank you for the breath, the shared breath that we all get to take together in physical form. That was the whole thing we signed up for, to transition from beautiful light to that oneness of love, to experiencing it in physical form, in this oddly boundary shaped form, fluid, fantastical phantasm world. To reconnect in the oneness beyond the physical form, but in physical form. To dance in both the spiritual unity of oneness and the physical separation of uniqueness. What a fascinating adventure to sign up for. And being mindful of the breath at the top of the hour is the first step to re-engaging with our highest knowing and all the answers that we need to address the shift that's coming. The climate shift, the human potential shift, the healing shift, all the intellect and creative juice to solve the problems that we've created to anticipate the shift in a loving way, to respond, to consciously respond, and not act out of fear or react out of rage, but instead to be consciously present to the acceleration of ingenuity and innovation and expansion of the intellect in ways we're going to tap into frequencies of knowing and understanding and processing of spectrums that we haven't even begun to imagine. And it starts with a unity breath. It starts with a simple breath and believing that something is bigger than all of us. And you get to have your definition of what that looks like, and I get to have mine. And we don't have to make each other wrong. We get to just ride the ride of loving breath together on this planet. A shared breath that the one thing that unites us is the biological, species-dependent aspect of love that is wired into us. Can we just meet each other there in a breath at the top of every hour? And then we'll figure out the rest as we go. It'll be messy. We have so much to forgive each other for, and so much to atone for. So much shame and harm that we've projected onto others, and that we've had projected onto us. There's a period of grieving, deep, sorrowful grieving, and forgiving, an era of forgrieving that lies ahead for all of us. And imagine the sweet surrender to that process. Because we cannot do that if we don't forgive ourselves, which is ultimately the biggest impediment to our healing, is forgiving ourselves, to fully love who we are, how we're built, what we look like, how we express. Oh my God, we stop comparing ourselves to others. The concept of other goes away. We don't look at otherness in nature. We just take in her majesty with every shade of color and texture and shape, and we marvel at her exquisite pageantry of uniqueness. And we enjoy the clusters of trees and lakes and rivers, and she's even got the whole design thing, like she's got this. She's got a little bit of something for everybody. Talk about diversity. We as humans are no different. Our shared breath of knowing tells us so. That's how we come home to ourselves again. Just the shared breath. And a fraction, a flicker of hope and inner knowing that we're better than this. I think that the fundamental emotion that is killing us right now, it's not rage, it's disappointment. It's disappointment that we haven't remembered this sooner. That we had to let it get this awful, this far. So many have to suffer because we're so out of step with our true nature of love. There's a cumulative, collective grief. Of the mother and the father. So disappointed in our children. Oh, what we've done to each other. The disappointment in ourselves, in humanity. Man's inhumanity to man. When we really pull back the whitewashing of our history, we can hardly forgive our atrocities to one another, our ignorance, our arrogance, our disconnectedness, all a feature of our separation. And our certainty of truth. We have talked ourselves into so many fucking truths about how we're supposed to treat each other. Bigotry, racism, misogyny, the patriarchy. We've talked ourselves into believing that some of those atrocities were worth it. That going to war with each other is worth it. Worth what? What could it possibly be worth? If we lose our soul, if we lose our connection to our highest source, to our highest knowing. We've talked ourselves into so many horrific things in the name of our certainty that our theory of everything justifies man's inhumanity to man. We have a lot to atone for as a species. And the greatest unforgivability will be in this moment when we can all feel the existential threat that we are facing because we have not taken care of our responsibility as stewards of this planet. Pachamama, she's a reflection of our sickness. We've projected our man's inhumanity to man on and through her. And so, as we're dying inside, so is she. So if you're not feeling an existential threat right now, then none of this breath stuff is going to even compute in your brain. You won't even be able to hold the thought that it's possible that we're here to do something really extraordinary. To live in harmony with each other. To tend for the least of these. To make sure that everybody has a fair baseline. That love is translated into the human form being tended at a baseline of love. That's just who we are. That's how we exist in the world. We be love to one another. That our society can thrive because we hold a foundation of love for each other. And we empower a structure that can support that. All of this ownership and control of resources. To what end? To our extinction. That's the inevitability of ownership. We have to imagine that there's a whole new way of existing that we haven't even considered before. That is different as life was 500 years ago. It could be 50 years from now because of how we can use technology and our connection to the wisdom of this planet through sacred plants to accelerate the ascension of our collective wisdom around how to live in harmony on this planet. If you don't think that's possible, then none of what the rest of us are breathing in is going to make sense to you. But here's the deal, it won't matter. Because we'll bring you along. We'll love you. We'll see your brokenness. We might need to isolate you a little bit from the rest of us. Keep you in a place where you can't infect the human operating system with fear and malware anymore. We have to draw a strong boundary around love. Love is a boundary. It is our only boundary. To love ourselves is to set a boundary. To love others is to set a boundary. To hold our beingness as a sovereign light in the world. Here to shine with all the rest, without making each other wrong, without claiming a moral authority of one theory of everything being more true than another. All of that is man-made bullshit. We made up those stories, those myths. Our creative brains have created belief systems that separate us. Now we get to rebirth ourselves into a whole model of society where we recognize that's the prize. That's where we all win. That's where our human, biological, energetic, fullest expression shows up. The only thing that wants the world to suffer is the part of us that's suffering. We heal ourselves, we heal the world. But we first have to believe that it's even possible. So we take a breath together once an hour. And that breath spills over into more kindness, more acceptance, more allowance, more connection and forgiveness, more resolution and reparation, more acceptance. And the judgments go away. And the projections go away. And we find fewer things to fight over and more things to unite over. Mother Earth is giving us an agenda. She set the agenda. It's to fall in love with her again. Fall in love with ourselves again. Love ourselves enough to recognize that if we want to keep living out this operating system of love, we got to fall in love with Pachamama. She's showing us the way home. It's such a beautiful, closed loop thought of perfection. The backdoor hack to the human form. So we don't survive without love. So instinctively, even if our cognitive skills are fucked over with stress and malware, biologically, instinctively, we know that where we're going is not okay. That the harm that we're doing to each other is not okay. That so many suffer for so few to have so much. Justice, social justice is built into our biological knowing because it is the expression, it is the how-to of love. And the further we devolve from a world where everyone is safe and seen, our biology can't handle that. The frequency of love in our bodies can't reconcile against the frequency of fear that we're being pummeled with. So instinctively we know better. It's a really clever story how all this comes together. The Divine Comedy, that the very separation is what eventually brings us back together. Because we can't tolerate the separation. We will break down to a point where we will have to just lay down our arms with each other. But what if we had the choice to not just lay down our arms, but to open our arms sooner rather than later? Wouldn't that be the most amazing story to tell? That we figured it out. That we showed up with each other as conscious human beings, fully present to the past, present, and the future of humanity, and the choice to move it in the direction of love. That's all we're asking of each other. It really is that simple. It's not hard. We've made this really hard. My dear friend says, it's a love affair and we're fucking it up. We came here to be love, to make love. Make love. In the unity field we all come from, the eternal waiting room in between lifetimes. We are love. We come to the human form to make love real in human form. Everything else is texture. Where we have no edges from each other in the unity field, we come to earth with lots and lots of edges. All the lottery of our birth over and over again. How we show up. Big, small, male, female, black, white, yellow, green, purple, blue, orange, striped, polka dotted. Look at Mother Nature. She does not have a rating system on beauty. We never look at Mother Nature in her exquisite innocence. And minimize her for her different expressions. There's an awe of acceptance and appreciation for all of her different expressions. Even if we only favor certain aspects, we're drawn tribally to be by the ocean or be in the mountains or live in the trees or live in the desert. Live where it's hot, live where it's cold, live where there's ice, live where there's none. Why are humans any different? Humans are just like nature. We are nature. And we're in the most advanced dance we've ever been in with her. For millions of years, she had her own cycle of death and rebirth. And then we showed up, and now we're in a shared cycle of death and rebirth. And it's an invitation from her to do this dance together. And our survival as a species depends on our cooperation with her to clean this up, to work with her, to use all of our mistakes of the past as resources for the future. That's the level of thinking we have to enter into. And we can't get there now in the current structures of resource management and hoarding and intellectual property rights and patents and geopolitical lines of power. All of those are man-made impediments to our highest expression. These ideas are radical only because we hold the lens of fear. The minute we can shift our lens of perception to the recognition that our bodies, our biological bone-knowing conversation tells us We're here to live a symbiotic existence on this planet or die. We know that's true. We see species dying all around us every day. We have an expiration date under the current structure. The lack of symbiotic relationship with this planet. She's teaching us how to dance in the light if we're willing to show up. And we can't show up if we don't believe it's possible, and we don't believe it's possible because we don't believe we're worthy of that much light. So all this comes down to a lack of belief in ourselves, which then spills out into what we believe is possible. We don't even trust our own ability to heal. What if we don't have to heal in the way that we've always thought we did? What if healing is really a question of context, of understanding how we got to where we are? What if healing is about a shift of perception about the source of suffering in this world? What if we could begin to embrace a whole new paradigm about suffering? That it is as random as the weather, that it is a movement of nature. And because we are human beings, the only species capable of killing themselves, because we wanted that free will thing. We designed a really complex model to work through. And it included starting with a fresh slate, not knowing that love is the answer, but learning it. And yet all the while giving ourselves a backdoor safety net, a hack of love. It's baked into our bodies or our hormones to go chase it, enjoy it, receive it, not shame it, not abuse it. To make love in human form is to show up conscious to the human experience. To show up conscious to the love that brought this forward into the world. That love is an ever-expanding reality. It will continue to expand out. It is its only force, is expansion. And it will take us to whatever extreme we want to lean into. Because eventually we will all be one again, either in the united field as an extinct species or in the here and now, because we unpacked the matrix. We figured it out because we paid attention to our bodies. We paid attention to our biological imperative for connection. And that only became acute to us because of the amount of disconnection. Because our shadow is so present in the world now, that fear is so high. No, it's our big fucking alarm clock in our bodies. So if we could look at the world through that lens of perception, that foregrieving period, can be a sweet reunion with all those that we've felt pain and suffering with. That we can ask forgiveness of all those that we didn't give the best of our light to. That the reparations we seek from each other are not monetary. They're psychic. They're witnessing of the pain that we've done to each other. That's all we're asking of each other, is to be witnessed in our humanity. To be forgiven and to forgive ourselves. We know better than this. How we're living today is not the best of us. And we know this. Everything as it's laying out before us, the mythical level of shadow work that's ecstatically expressing into the universe right now, magnifies, amplifies how profound this moment is in our evolution as a species toward consciousness. We win in the end either way. Because there is no heaven or hell, no degrees of glory. No, there's just awake and asleep. And we all get to be awake when we return to the light. We're all awake. There's nothing to forgive. We just know. Coming to the earth, that's when we fall asleep. We are sleepwalking our way through this. And the game is, can we wake up before we walk ourselves off the edge? Can we wake enough of us up to pull back the covers, open up the shades, so everyone else can wake up too? So we don't need the whole world. According to the TED Talk, 3.5%. Taking a breath at the top of every hour. Thank you for being alive in this world, present to the expansion of love in physical form. That's what we came for. To return to our holy light in the dance with the physical form of reality on a physical planet with whom we have to make love and have an intimate relationship with her to survive as a species. If we stay on the arc of fear, we're on a path of mutual destruction. And even the oligarchs at the top will not be able to insulate themselves from the crash, the suffering. Nobody gets out of this alive. They just don't. If the world is so toxic that some die, eventually everybody will die. It's just a question of how long it takes. Or how we don't wait for them to figure out there is no survival for them either. We just start moving all the resources around. We start putting our resources, our human resources, and I don't mean just money, our human psychic resources towards the solutions. We start open sourcing everything. We start accelerating and downloading wisdom from our highest selves. The rest of us is waiting up there. This is just a fractal iteration of who we are that's dancing in this movement. Because we all exist as one, all of you is still there. You get to go access your highest self and then show up with that wisdom, that part of your zone of genius that you know is in you. We all have it. We've all felt a piece of it, some glimmer of it, where we just know this is what I was made to do. If you've not felt that experience, then you deserve to figure it out. And we, as a species, ought to be able to configure a world where there's room for people to go to school and go have experiences. Like, that's what we become consumers of, human potential. We can. There's so much room for conscious capitalism in all this. We don't even have to deconstruct everything. Let's just make our most consumable products human consciousness and potential. And then we'll figure the rest of the shit out, right? The only thing that keeps us from realizing this fantastical dream is a failure of imagination. We're failing ourselves. We thought ourselves into this mess. We can wake up and think ourselves out of it. But we have to first be really honest with ourselves about whether or not we are willing, and more important, ready to have this kind of healing conversation where we strip away all the ego, all the ownership, all the fear, and drop into a place of breath, shared breath with one another. Let's just do that for a month. Let's just suspend all the disbelief that's coming up in our belly right now, like it isn't possible. No way. I've thought of this myself, but it just seems too simplistic that if we just all slow down and show up with each other with a breath, how could anything so simple, so elegant, intrinsically elegant to the human condition, how could it be so simple? That if we peel back all the layers and look at what our biology tells us about our spiritual center, seems pretty self-evident. Scientifically and viscerally true. That love is the backdoor hack. When the malware of generational wounding has so corrupted our files that we can't even recognize ourselves in the mirror anymore. That we could let so many in this world suffer around us and do nothing. To pretend that we have our heart in the right place, but then just keep consuming at the rate that we're consuming. I'm dealing with it now. I look at everything in this house now and think, how do I get rid of all the mistakes I've made in the past without adding to them in the present? We have so much we have to figure out here. We can't waste any more time on fighting with who's got the smartest fucking church. We've got to stop putting our money in places where we're propping that story up. I'm sorry, no more tax deductions for churches. That is a theory of everything that separates. Let's start putting tax deductions in place for groups and companies that solve our biggest problems. The prize is healing, not consuming, and not profiting from each other. It's healing each other. That's the prize. We have a lot of work to do to set aside our biases. We've done a lot of harm to each other. We are reaching a moment biologically, we know this in our bellies, that the future is unsustainable for us and that change is a-coming. This is a moment where the wisdom of our bodies gets to overrule all of the ego projected charismatic storytellers that tried to make their theory of everything the only one right theory of everything. There have been great teachers throughout our time who brought this very same message forward. We are here to love and be loved. All the great religious scholars and masters had a golden rule as the foundation. This is our universal truth. This is our symbiotic reality for survival. And beyond that, there is no survival unless we thrive. That's really the choice we're making. Do we want to thrive? Do we want to thrive as a species? The only thing that would keep us from a yes to that is a feeling that we're not worthy of it, or that we're not capable of it. And the only reason we would think we're not capable is that we're not worthy. Just don't believe it's possible. This is a pivot field of pure potentiality that we're entering into, dependent solely on the recognition of the unity field. That we are the co-creators of this existence, and that if enough of us know this in our belly and breathe into it every day in unison, I can only imagine that the light that shines in each of us individually now becomes so exquisitely rainbow prism magnified, expanding the grid of light to lift all others who are maybe just holding a candle flame of hope in their bellies right now. We have a lot to work out. I know, I can feel the belly saying, no, the belly is so scared to surrender to this knowing. It wants to cling to the old structures of ownership and accumulation, hoarding. Those are old structures, old postures. It's going to take a lot to break them down. But don't lean into that. Allow that there's a new trust that's coming. Just allow for that possibility. That rather than getting caught up in the fear of what we're going to lose, power, control, status, wealth, access, protection, all the motivators born out of fear, truly born out of fear, coping strategies honed to such a high degree of performance, so addictive as to keep us burning ourselves out at such a pace. Again, built into the dis-ease of slowing down and listening to ourselves again. How many people get to the end of life through disease or age and have those final moments of recognition that really what mattered most in their life were the connections, the places where they made a difference. We know what's important to us as human beings. Just imagine the whole planet switched on to solving the problems. Talk about joy off the fucking charts. We just have to believe in just a little bit of this at a time. Breathe in what's possible. And then we'll figure it out. I know it seems outrageous that it could all shift with a breath. But it's what we were given. It is our sacred knowing. It is the beginning of life. That we breathe together. Oh, it is our sacred birthright to breathe. The love. And to be witnessed in that is why we are showing up in this field together.